The shot cracked the silence wide open. It was late August of 1879, in the hills outside Silver Ridge, Montana. The sun was sliding low, turning the wheat fields the color of burnt gold. Isaiah Cole had just set a saddle strap when he heard a woman scream, a sound so raw it didn't belong to daylight. Sparrowhawk, his blue-gray Mustang, jerked his head and snorted. The scream came again, closer this time, from the Whitcomb barn. Isaiah didn't think. He just moved, spurs flashing, fear and duty running neck and neck. Somewhere behind the sound, something in him already knew. This wasn't the first time he'd have to break a door to set someone free. The wind cut across the slope as he rode hard, coat snapping at his shoulders. Dust lifted in sheets from the dry road, and by the time he reached the barn, the last of the sunlight was bleeding away behind the buttes. The place smelled of hay, whiskey, and old anger. A board had been jammed across the door from the outside. He swung down, grabbed the bar with both hands, and heaved. The wood groaned, split at the knot. Inside, a lantern had been knocked over, spilling light and smoke in wild shapes. Eva Whitcomb stood near the back wall, her face streaked with dirt, a torn sleeve showing blood at her shoulder. In front of her, Silas Crowley held a broken bottle like a knife, his face a map of greed and cheap rage. "Get out of here, Cole," Silas spat. "Ain't your business what happens on Whitcomb land." Isaiah stepped forward, slow, steady. "She's not your business either." His voice wasn't loud, but it had weight, the kind that made horses go still. Outside, the Mustang pawed the ground once, then quieted. Silas laughed, an ugly, hollow sound, and lunged. Isaiah moved quicker, caught his wrist, twisted, sent the man crashing into the hay. The bottle shattered, glass ringing like rain on tin. For a moment, the world shrank to the sound of Eva's breathing and the hiss of the lantern flame licking the floor. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded once, eyes wide but steady. He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the open air. Behind them, Silas roared, scrambling to his feet. A flashback cut through Isaiah's mind. A different barn, years ago, Union blue on his sleeve, fire and gunpowder choking the night. He remembered dragging a wounded man out of the flames, the man whispering a name, Whitcomb. Then the roof came down. The memory passed like smoke, leaving the same ache it always did. They reached the door. Isaiah threw his shoulder against it just as another shot exploded. Splinters bit into his cheek. He half turned, saw the pistol in Silas's hand, the wild gleam in his eyes. He caught Eva's wrist, yanked her into the saddle, swung up behind her. Sparrowhawk bolted into the dusk, hooves drumming over the hard earth. They didn't look back. The sky was burning itself out above the ridges, red melting to ash. Wind tore through Isaiah's hair. He could feel Eva shaking, her breath caught somewhere between a sob and a prayer. "Hold on," he murmured, low enough the wind might keep it. The horse carried them down the valley, through the sagebrush and shadow. Behind them a final shot echoed off the hills and was swallowed by distance. When they reached the edge of the river crossing, Isaiah slowed the horse. The air smelled of silt and pine. He turned slightly, meaning to speak but stopped when he saw her face, how the last light touched it, how the fear there was already giving way to disbelief. "Why did you come?" she asked softly. Isaiah looked past her, toward the burning edge of the sky. "Because someone has to." For a moment, neither moved. The wind picked up again, whispering through the tall grass like a voice that almost remembered their names. Far back, the barn stood against the fading sun, smoke curling from its roof. Isaiah's eyes lingered on that thin line of smoke, an omen, or maybe just another story beginning. He tugged the reins. "We need to ride before dark." As they crossed the shallow ford, the chill water hit his boots, and he felt it, the pull of a past not yet buried, and a debt that had just risen with the dust. He didn't say a word. The night was coming on, and some truths are better carried in silence. The moon climbed over the ridge as they vanished into the dark. Behind them, a single board from the barn door hung loose, tapping against the wall in the wind, like something trying to speak, but never quite finding the words. The moon had climbed high by the time they reached Isaiah's ranch. The little house sat low against the hills, one lamp burning in the window, the smell of smoke and sage mixing with the cold air. Sparrowhawk stopped on his own, snorting softly. Isaiah slid down first, then helped Eva off the saddle. Her dress was torn, her left shoulder wet with blood that looked black in the moonlight. Inside, the cabin was quiet except for the ticking of an old clock and the soft hum of the fire. Aunt Delilah, Aunt Dell to everyone for 20 miles, was already at the stove, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp as flint. She didn't ask questions. She just reached for the kettle. "Sit her down," she said, "and don't you bleed on my table, Cole." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Wouldn't dream of it." He eased Eva into a chair. The girl shivered, holding herself small. Aunt Dell poured whiskey into a tin cup, soaked a rag, and handed it to Isaiah. The smell hit him, raw, biting. He pressed it gently to Eva's wound. She winced, fingers tightening on the edge of the table, but didn't make a sound. The lamplight flickered, gold and tired. Dust motes drifted in the air, slow as snow. Isaiah's hands moved with the steadiness that comes from habit, the same care he once used binding soldiers' wounds, years and states away. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost a thought. "You're safe here." Eva looked up at him, uncertain. "He said my father sold the ranch," she whispered. "But my father, he wouldn't. There's a letter in his desk. I know it. Something about the land and oil." Her words faltered on the last sound, like she'd said too much. Isaiah rinsed the cloth, laid it across her shoulder. "We'll find it," he said. "Tomorrow." She studied him, as if trying to read what wasn't being said. "You knew my father?" Isaiah hesitated, the rag pausing in his hand. The fire popped behind him, throwing a brief shadow across his face. "A little," he answered. "A long time ago." She didn't press, but her eyes lingered, and something in them told him she understood that a little might mean much more than he'd ever say. Outside, the night stretched wide and soundless. The only thing moving was the wind slipping through the birch trees that marked the edge of his land. Their leaves whispered like voices remembering half-forgotten prayers. Aunt Dell finished pouring coffee and set 2 mugs down. "Drink," she said to Eva. "You look half a ghost." Eva took the cup with both hands. The heat steadied her. "Thank you." Dell smiled, and for a moment, her rough face softened. "You rest tonight. Morning's another storm." Isaiah stepped out to the porch after, letting the cold air hit him. The sky was so clear it almost hurt to look at. He could see the barn from here, the faint plume of smoke still hanging like a bruise against the stars. He leaned on the railing, fingers tight around the post. He didn't notice Sparrowhawk until the horse pawed the ground 3 times, sharp and even. It was the sound the animal made when something felt wrong on the wind. Isaiah straightened, scanning the ridgeline. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a lantern's glow far off on the road, moving slow, too slow for a traveler, too steady for a ranch hand. Then it went dark. He stayed there a while, listening to the silence. When he finally went inside, Eva had fallen asleep by the fire, her hair spilling over the blanket Aunt Dell had wrapped around her. The clock ticked like a heartbeat. Isaiah looked down at her face, pale under the lamplight, calm now, and something inside him shifted. A memory stirred. A man in uniform handing him a folded letter saying, "She'll need someone when I'm gone." He hadn't thought of that moment in years. Maybe he hadn't wanted to. He turned toward the fire, added another log. The flames climbed, throwing warm light across the walls, across the old photograph on the mantel, him in a cavalry coat, eyes shadowed, mouth too tight. Tomorrow, they'd ride into Silver Ridge. Sheriff Ruiz would know what to do. There were still laws in Montana, even for men like Silas Crowley. But for now, Isaiah could only listen. To the ticking, to the faint snore of Sparrowhawk outside, to the sound of the girl breathing steady again. He sat in the chair across from her, hat in his lap, and let his body ease for the first time all day. The room smelled of whiskey, smoke, and safety. Strange mix, but it fit the night. Outside, the wind rose again, brushing against the windows like a hand. Far off, hooves echoed once on the dirt road, then faded. He looked toward the door, jaw tightening, every sense alert. Sparrowhawk pawed the ground, 3 sharp beats. Isaiah stood, eyes narrowing toward the dark. Someone was out there. Isaiah didn't sleep that night. He stayed near the window, a rifle across his knees, watching the horizon turn from black to gray, to the faint gold of dawn. When the rooster crowed, it felt too ordinary for the kind of night he'd just lived through. He glanced toward the hearth. Eva was still there, curled beneath Aunt Dell's old quilt, her breathing slow, face turned to the firelight. He brewed coffee quietly, the smell filling the cabin, bitter and grounding. When she stirred awake, her first movement was small, a hand lifting to her temple, then to her ear. He noticed it. He'd noticed a lot in the quiet hours. "Morning," he said. She nodded, still half dreaming. "It's morning already?" "Almost. he answered. You'll feel it when the sun hits those hills. She tried to smile, but winced at the light. Isaiah shifted to her right side when he spoke again, his voice low and steady. You can eat if you're hungry. Aunt Dell's biscuits could wake the dead. Eva blinked, realizing where he stood. You always stay on that side? Isaiah paused. Easier for you to hear me, isn't it? Her lips parted, caught between surprise and something like gratitude. Since I was a child, she said softly. My left ear doesn't hear much anymore. It makes people impatient. Not me, Isaiah said simply. I just need to know where to stand. The words landed softly, but she felt them. He turned back to the table, tore a biscuit in half, and handed it to her. For a while, neither spoke. Time 400 pems. The morning light crept through the window, warm against the rough plank walls. When Aunt Dell came in, her basket full of herbs, she took one look at them and grunted. You're taking her into town today, I suppose? Isaiah nodded. Sheriff Ruiz needs to see that letter. Eva looked up sharply. But we don't have it yet. It's still in my father's desk. He met her gaze. Then we'll get it first. Aunt Dell snorted. You're both going to stir up trouble with that man Crowley. I can feel it in my bones. Isaiah smiled faintly. You've been feeling trouble since before I was born. Dell's eyes softened. And I was right every time. After breakfast, Isaiah stepped outside to ready the horses. The air was crisp, the world washed clean by dawn. He ran a hand down Sparrowhawk's neck, the horse tossing his head with quiet understanding. In the distance, the fields glimmered under the early light. Peaceful, too peaceful. Behind him, the cabin door creaked. Eva appeared, wrapped in one of Aunt Dell's shawls, her hair loosely braided, face still marked by exhaustion. Yet her posture was different, straighter somehow, like she'd borrowed a little of the sunrise's courage. I'm ready, she said. Isaiah saddled the mare for her, adjusting the stirrups. We'll ride slow till we reach the orchard behind your place. Less chance of being seen. She watched his hands as he worked, broad, scarred, steady. You've done this 1,000 times, she murmured. He gave a short laugh. Feels like more. When they mounted, she sat behind him, and he could feel the tremor in her hands as they found his coat. Time 400 mems. You don't have to be afraid, he said quietly. I'm not afraid of him, she replied. I'm afraid of what he's taken. They rode out as the first edge of sun broke over the ridge, turning the world to gold. The path wound through dry grass and sagebrush, the scent sharp and clean. Birds scattered ahead of them, wings flashing white in the light. Halfway across the lower meadow, Isaiah slowed. The quiet was too deep. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He scanned the distance, the hills, the fence line, the narrow dirt road leading toward the Whitcomb property. Nothing moved. Still, something in his gut warned him they weren't alone. He turned slightly in the saddle, speaking just loud enough for her to hear with her right ear. If we're followed, You keep low and ride west. Don't stop until you reach the creek." Eva's eyes found his, steady and unflinching. "You always talk like this is the last day you'll live." "Every man who's been to war does," he said. They reached the ridge above her family's orchard just as the sun cleared the mountains. Below them, the white blossoms shimmered in the light breeze, and beyond that lay the house, still and silent. Eva looked down at it, her throat tightening. "It's strange," she said softly. "From here, it almost looks like home again." Isaiah didn't answer. He was watching the barn, the same one he'd torn open hours earlier. Smoke still clung to its roof beams, faint but stubborn. For a moment he closed his eyes and heard again the sound of her scream. How it had torn something loose inside him he didn't know was still bound. He opened his eyes. "We'll get your father's papers," he said. "Then we'll go to the sheriff." She nodded, gripping the saddle horn. "Then let's not waste the morning." Isaiah glanced toward the tree line one last time. A crow flapped from a fence post and took off toward the valley, its shadow cutting briefly across the field. He didn't like how it looked, like a black warning sliding across sunlight. He turned the horse downhill. Behind them, the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke and whiskey from somewhere too close. The trail that wound toward the Whitcomb ranch was narrow and half overgrown, a path meant for deer and ghosts. The morning had settled into a quiet too clean to trust. Isaiah rode first, sparrowhawk's hooves muffled on the damp ground. Behind him, Eva kept her mare close, eyes scanning every dip and shadow. The air smelled of rain from days before, of sage and the faint sweetness of apple blossoms drifting down the valley. They stopped on a rise overlooking the orchard. From here, the Whitcomb land stretched wide and proud. Rows of apple trees still heavy with late summer fruit, their branches swaying like tired hands. Beyond them stood the big house, its paint fading, shutters half broken, and beside it the barn where everything had changed. Eva's breath caught. "It looks smaller," she whispered. Isaiah nodded. "Things usually do when you've had to fight your way out of them." She stared at the trees, remembering running through them barefoot as a child, her father's laughter echoing through the orchard. Now the silence hurt. He dismounted, motioning for her to do the same. Pinto, the old hound from the Whitcomb place, came trotting out of the brush, tail wagging in lopsided circles. One ear was gone, a scar marking the place where a trap had caught him long ago. Eva dropped to her knees. "Pinto," she breathed, arms around the dog's neck. The animal whined, pressed close, licking the blood on her torn sleeve as if to erase it. Isaiah smiled faintly. "Seems he remembers who belongs here." Pinto barked once, low and soft, then turned toward the orchard as though guiding them. They followed, slipping between the trees. Blossoms brushed their shoulders, scattering petals into the air. Isaiah's hand hovered near his revolver, but the only sounds were birds and the rustle of leaves. "Your father planted these himself?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "He said the land should feed people, not just own them." He looked at her then. Really looked. and for a moment, the fear in her eyes softened into something steadier. "He was right," Isaiah said. As they reached the edge of the clearing, the house rose before them, grand but weary. Windows gaped like hollow eyes. Near the side, the old trellis of climbing roses reached up toward the second floor, wild and tangled, but still clinging. Eva followed his gaze. "That's my room," she said. "The east window. The vines used to bloom every spring." "Think it'll hold?" She smiled faintly. "It used to hold me." He crouched, testing the lower slats. They creaked, but didn't give. "You'll have to go first. I'll follow." She looked at him. "You trust it to bear both of us?" "I trust you to climb light," he said, half teasing, though his voice stayed low. Pinto settled at the base of the wall, tail sweeping the dirt. "He'll keep watch," Isaiah murmured. Eva hesitated, fingers on the lowest rung of vine. "If they see us—" "They won't," Isaiah cut in. "Keep to the shadows. Move slow." She started up, gripping the wooden frame, the roses brushing against her sleeves. Petals fell around her like drops of faded memory. When she reached the window, she glanced down. Isaiah was right below, one hand, ready to catch her if she slipped. Inside, she could see her room as she'd left it months ago. The writing desk beneath the window, her father's photograph on the dresser, the patchwork quilt still folded at the foot of the bed. For an instant, she was 12 again, watching rain slide down the glass while her father read to her by lantern light. The memory came and went like breath. She pushed the window open. The hinges moaned softly, and she slipped inside. Isaiah followed, silent as shadow. They landed in the room without a sound. The air smelled of dust, lavender, and neglect. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, cutting lines across the floorboards. He looked around carefully, eyes settling on the desk. "You said there's a box?" Eva nodded. "Behind the panel under the floor. Father showed me once. Said it was where our real deeds were kept. In case law ever forgets justice, he called it." Isaiah crouched, running his hand along the boards until one shifted slightly beneath his fingers. "Here," he said, prying it loose. Beneath lay a small iron box and a yellowed envelope tied with twine. Eva knelt beside him, trembling as she lifted the envelope. Her father's handwriting was clear, firm even in age. She untied it with care. A small key slipped into her palm, glinting like a secret. She read the first line aloud, voice unsteady. "If you are reading this, my daughter, trust Sheriff Ruiz and trust Isaiah Cole." She froze. Her eyes met his. "He knew you." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Your father was a good man." "What does he mean by this?" she pressed, her voice shaking. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the light, slanting across the floor, on the place where his reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. "That's a story for another time," he said finally. She studied him, something dawning in her gaze. Curiosity, confusion, a faint hurt. Before she could speak, a sound rose from the hallway below. Heavy boots. Slow. deliberate. Isaiah stood, motioning for silence. Pinto's bark cut through the still air, followed by a low growl. Then another voice, rough, familiar, echoed from the kitchen. "Check upstairs." Eva's breath hitched. Isaiah drew his revolver, eyes narrowing toward the door. He glanced back at her once. "Window," he whispered. The doorknob turned, and the silence broke. The doorknob clicked once, slow and sure. Isaiah motioned with 2 fingers. Quiet. Eva backed toward the open window, the key clutched tight in her fist. Below, Pinto barked again, sharp and urgent, buying them seconds. Isaiah's heartbeat steadied into focus. He'd lived through ambushes. This was no different, except that now there was someone behind him worth dying for. The door creaked open. A shadow filled the frame. Boone Pike, Silas Crowley's hired hand, broad as the doorway, breath heavy with whiskey. Behind him, Calder's boots scraped the floorboards. "Search every room," Boone growled. "Crowley wants that letter found." Isaiah stepped into the strip of light, silent, hand hovering near his revolver. Eva froze. Boone turned, eyes narrowing. Too late. The first blow came fast, Isaiah's fist crashing into his jaw. The man staggered, grabbed for his gun, but Isaiah was already moving, shoulder driving hard into his chest. They slammed into the hallway wall, wood splintering. Calder cursed, reaching for his weapon. Eva reacted before she thought, grabbed the lamp from the desk and hurled it. It shattered at Calder's feet, flames licking across the floor. "Go!" Isaiah barked, shoving Boone away. Eva climbed out onto the rose trellis, skirts catching on the thorns. The wood groaned under her weight, but held. Isaiah swung one leg over the sill, fired once down the hallway to keep the men back, then leapt out after her. They slid down through a rain of petals and smoke, landing hard among the rose bushes. Pinto darted from the shadows, barking wildly. Isaiah caught Eva's hand, pulling her toward the orchard. Behind them, the window burst open. Boone's curse tore through the air. They ran, ducking low between the trees. Isaiah's breath came short, but steady. Eva kept pace, her braid loose, eyes wide and bright. The letter and key were still in her grip. When they reached the edge of the orchard, they stopped beneath an apple tree, both gasping. "We can't go straight to town," Isaiah said. "They'll have riders on every road." "Then where?" she asked. "Back through the ridge. We'll swing by the creek, then to Sheriff Ruiz." She nodded, though fear flickered across her face. "They'll burn everything looking for us." Isaiah looked toward the horizon, the house already shrinking behind them. "Then we'd better make sure there's something left to see." A gust of wind carried the smell of smoke, real smoke this time. He turned, saw flames spreading along the roof edge where the lamp had broken. The sight hit Eva like a wound. "My father's house," she whispered. He gripped her shoulder gently. "He built more than walls, Eva. What matters isn't burning." For a long heartbeat, she stood still, watching the fire climb. Then she looked down at the key in her palm, small and cold. "We still don't know what it opens." Isaiah's gaze softened. "We will." They moved again, cutting through the orchard until the trees thinned and the open field stretched ahead. Pinto ran before them, tail high, his bark echoing, like a guide. Sparrowhawk waited near the fence line, as if he'd known where they'd come out. Isaiah helped Eva into the saddle. She swayed, catching herself on his arm. "You hold on tight," he said. "I've learned how," she replied, managing a faint smile. They mounted and rode fast, the horses pounding through the tall grass, the wind tearing the smoke away behind them. For a while, the only sound was the rhythm of hooves and the rustle of wind. When the ridge came into view, Isaiah slowed, scanning the land behind them. "They'll follow the tracks," he said. "We'll need to cross the stream twice to lose them." Eva turned in the saddle. The Whitcomb house was a dark silhouette now, the fire just a flicker against the morning sky. She swallowed hard. "I can't go back there again," she said softly. Isaiah didn't answer right away. "You don't have to," he said finally. "But one day, you might want to." They reached the creek, its water cold and clear. As the horses stepped in, the sound of pursuit echoed faintly behind them. Voices, shouts, the dull thunder of more hooves. Isaiah tightened his reins. "They're close." He spurred Sparrowhawk across the water, the spray rising in silver arcs. On the other bank, he looked back once, just enough to see Boone and Calder breaking from the orchard, rifles raised. Eva gasped as a shot rang out. The bullet split a branch above them, showering leaves like rain. "Keep your head down," Isaiah shouted. They raced toward the ridge, the horses straining uphill. Pinto stayed at their heels, barking furiously. Another shot cracked, striking a stone near Isaiah's boot. When they finally reached the crest, he pulled Sparrowhawk to a stop and turned the horse sideways, firing 2 quick rounds back down the slope. The echoes rolled through the valley, startling the crows from the trees. Then silence. Isaiah's chest rose and fell, eyes scanning the distant figures below. The riders hesitated, turned their horses back toward the burning house. Eva's hand trembled as she clutched the key. "It's not over," she said. "No," he agreed. "It's just starting." The wind carried the smell of ash and apple blossoms mixed together, sweet and bitter, like memory. Isaiah looked at the smoke rising from the valley and knew something old had begun to stir, something that wouldn't rest until truth came out. He urged Sparrowhawk forward again. "We ride to Ruiz," he said, "before they can bury the rest of it." Behind them, the orchard burned slow and quiet, and Pinto gave one last bark before following their trail into the wild country. The fight for truth had only just begun. They rode hard through the open country, wind cutting their faces, the smell of burnt wood still clinging to their clothes. The ridge fell behind them, swallowed by the rising heat of the day. Eva pressed herself close against Isaiah's back, one arm wrapped around his waist, her other hand clutching the small key like it might vanish if she let go. Pinto ran ahead, barking sharp, guiding them down the old cattle trail toward the creek bend. Isaiah knew these lands better than most men knew their own memories. He'd dug wells here, driven cattle, buried friends. He also knew Crowley's men wouldn't quit, the kind who followed orders not for loyalty, but for the promise of cruelty. When they reached a patch of cottonwoods, Isaiah slowed Sparrowhawk, holding up a hand. "We'll rest the horses," he said. "They've done more than their share." Eva slid down, legs unsteady, breath shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was fading, leaving a tremor beneath her ribs. Isaiah loosened the saddle straps, his movements calm, practiced. She leaned against a tree, looking out over the creek, water quick and bright beneath the noon sun. It should have been beautiful, but all she felt was weight behind her eyes. The house burning, her father's handwriting, Silas's voice shouting her name. Isaiah filled his canteen and handed it to her. She drank, hands trembling. "How far to Silver Ridge?" "5 miles as the crow flies," he said. "But we won't take the crow's road. Too open. We'll cut north along the ravine." She nodded. Then after a beat, "You've done this before. Running, fighting, knowing where to hide." His gaze drifted toward the water. "Once," he said, "long ago. Thought I'd left that part of me buried with the uniform." A dragonfly hovered above the creek, wings flashing blue and green. Eva's voice softened. "You said my father trusted you." "I owed him my life," Isaiah replied. "He saved me when no one else would. I was caught up after the war. Wrong place, wrong color, wrong everything. He pulled me out of a noose." She looked at him, eyes wide. "And you never told me?" "Didn't seem like something you'd owe me for." Her expression shifted. Grief, gratitude, and something gentler. "You could have left me there," she said. "I could have," Isaiah admitted. "Didn't want to." Pinto barked suddenly, low and sharp. Isaiah froze, tilting his head. From across the creek came the faintest echo, hoofbeats, distant but real. He motioned for silence. The sound grew clearer, men's voices, thin under the wind. "They've split up," Isaiah murmured. "2, maybe 3 on this trail." Eva's heart thudded hard. "What do we do?" He scanned the banks. "There's a hollow ahead. We'll move through the creek. It'll hide our tracks." He led Sparrowhawk into the water, guiding the reins with one hand and keeping his revolver ready with the other. The creek reached his boots, cold and fast. Eva followed, her mare hesitating, thus stepping in. Pinto swam beside them, only his head above the ripples. They moved slow, careful, the current masking the sound of hooves. Eva's skirt soaked to the knee, clinging cold against her legs. Her pulse pounded louder than the water itself. Crack. A branch snapped on the bank. Voices. Isaiah stopped, motioning her down behind a fallen log at the bend. They crouched low, half submerged. 2 riders appeared opposite, rifles slung, eyes sweeping the water. "Tracks end here," one said. "You think they doubled back?" "Maybe," the other grunted. "Crowley'll skin us if we come back empty." They lingered, spitting tobacco, scanning the trees. Isaiah's hand stayed on his gun, but he didn't move. Eva's breath brushed his shoulder, a tight, shaking rhythm. At last, the riders turned their horses, heading downstream. The sound faded, and the rush of water returned. Isaiah exhaled the first breath he dared take in minutes. "You didn't even blink," Eva whispered, voice shaky near his ear. "Blinking's loud," he said. When it was safe, they climbed out, wet and mud-streaked, leading the horses up the slope. The trail opened into a clearing ringed with wildflowers. They stopped just long enough to breathe, to feel the sun again. Eva sat on a rock, wringing water from her skirt. Her hands shook less now. "Do you think they'll follow us all the way?" "They'll follow the scent of fear," Isaiah said, "so don't feed it." She looked up at him. "And you? What keeps you from it?" He thought a moment. "You." Sparrowhawk jerked his head, ears pricking east. A shot split the stillness, echoing through the hills. Eva gasped, clutching Isaiah's arm. The bullet missed, but the sound tore through her left ear, the world spinning bright with pain. Her knees buckled. Isaiah caught her, voice steady even as his pulse roared. "You're all right. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I can't hear." He pulled her close, shielding her as a distant shout rose from the ridge. "We're moving," he said, lifting her onto Sparrowhawk. The Mustang reared once, then charged forward, muscles coiled with strength. Wind tore past them as Isaiah held her steady, whispering near her right ear, the only one that could still hear. "Hold on, Eva. We're almost there." The sun blazed ahead, and behind them the shouts faded into the wide, endless breadth of the prairie. By the time they reached Silver Ridge, the afternoon light had gone soft and coppery. The town was small, just one long street lined with false front buildings, dust swirling in lazy spirals where the wind caught the boards loose on the porch rails. Isaiah reined Sparrowhawk to a stop outside the sheriff's office. Eva leaned forward in the saddle, pale but steady now, her left ear bandaged beneath her hair. Sheriff Alma Ruiz stepped out before Isaiah could knock. She was a tall woman in her 40s, hat tilted low, eyes sharp as the brass star on her chest. She saw the blood, the soot, the fear that still clung to both riders, and her hand went straight to the pistol on her hip. "Cole," she said flatly, "what did you bring me this time?" Isaiah dismounted, lifting Eva gently down. "Trouble that smells of Crowley," he said. Ruiz's gaze shifted to the girl. "Eva Whitcomb." Her tone softened, but not by much. "Your father was a good man. You're lucky to be standing here." Eva swallowed hard. "I almost wasn't." Ruiz nodded once. "Come inside before half this town hears." The sheriff's office was dim and cool. The floorboards creaked under their boots. A single map of the county hung on the wall, pins marking the oil claims that had begun to divide neighbors from friends. Ruiz gestured to the chair by her desk. "Sit. Tell me everything." Isaiah spoke first, voice low, measured. "Silas Crowley's men held her in that barn, said her father's land was sold. It wasn't. We've got proof." He laid the envelope on the desk. Eva placed the small key beside it. Ruiz's eyes narrowed as she unfolded the letter, lips moving silently as she read. Then she looked up. "This is Whitcomb's signature, all right," she said. "And that key," she picked it up, turning it between her fingers, "looks like one of the deposit boxes at the First Union Bank." Eva straightened. "Then the papers, Father's real deeds, they're there?" "Likely," Ruiz said. "And if Crowley forged a sale, that'll nail him clean to the wall." She leaned back in her chair, studying Isaiah. "And what's your stake in this, Cole? You and I both know you don't pick fights that ain't personal." Isaiah met her gaze without flinching. "It is personal. Whitcomb saved my life once. I owed him. And she," he glanced toward Eva, "deserves to live on her land, not run from it." Ruiz held his stare a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "I figured as much. Your name was in his old file. Said if anything happened to him, I was to trust your word as I would his." Ava's eyes widened. "He told you that?" Ruiz nodded again. "He did. But the world changes fast, girl, and Crowley's got half this town in his pocket. If we go after him, we do it right." Isaiah crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "Meaning I'll need a warrant before I touch his property," Ruiz said. "But once I've got that, we're paying him a visit." She reached for her quill, signed her name on a sheet of paper, and slid it across the desk. "This here's the beginning of that visit." Ava's hands trembled slightly as she looked at the warrant. "Will it be enough?" "It'll have to be," Ruiz said. Then she turned to Isaiah. "Get her cleaned up and meet me at the Crowley place before dusk. I want the man cornered before he can start burning evidence." Isaiah nodded. "He's already burning more than that." Ruiz's brows lifted. "His house?" "Whitcomb's," Isaiah said quietly. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Then we're out of time." Eva stood, exhaustion replaced by something sharper. Resolve. "I'm coming with you," she said. Ruiz started to protest, but the look in Eva's eyes stopped her. "You sure you're ready for that?" Eva touched the bandage near her ear. "I've had enough of being left behind." The sheriff almost smiled. "All right then. But you stay close to me, and when I say move, you move." Isaiah gave a short nod. "We'll follow your lead." Ruiz turned to the deputy in the corner, a thin young man polishing a Winchester that looked too big for his hands. "Fetch Garner from the bank," she said. "Tell him I'm invoking Code 12 for an emergency inspection." The deputy blinked. "Ma'am, that code hasn't been used since honest men stopped trusting liars," Ruiz cut in. "Go." He left in a hurry. The room went still again, save for the ticking clock. Eva leaned against the desk. "Sheriff," she said softly, "when my father died, they told me it was an accident, a fall from his horse." Ruiz's eyes darkened. "I read the report. Didn't believe a word of it." Isaiah spoke before the silence stretched too long. "If that letter's what I think it is, we'll have more than proof of fraud. We'll have motive." Ruiz folded the warrant, tucking it into her coat. "Then saddle up, Cole. We're about to see how deep Crowley's rot goes." They stepped out into the fading afternoon. The street smelled of dust and old whiskey. Across the way, a man leaned against a post, pretending to roll a cigarette, but watching them too closely. Isaiah noticed, eyes narrowing. As Ruiz adjusted her hat, she muttered, "He knows we're coming." Isaiah's voice was calm, almost grim. "Then let's make sure he knows why." The three of them started toward their horses. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky the color of copper and blood. Somewhere at the far edge of town, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Eva glanced back at the street, the shadows stretching long behind them. "Do you think justice still works here?" she asked quietly. Isaiah swung into the saddle. "We'll find out before nightfall." By the time they reached the Crowley estate, night had pulled its blanket tight over the hills. The sky hung low and red in the west, still carrying the memory of day. The house stood on a rise of land, big and proud, its lamps glowing like watchful eyes. Isaiah, Sheriff Ruiz, and Eva dismounted near the stable, moving through the shadows with the practiced silence of people who've had enough of being hunted. "Stay behind me," Ruiz murmured. The badge on her chest caught a glint of light. "If this goes south, you ride, both of you." "Not again," Eva said, steady. Ruiz's eyes softened for just a second, then hardened again. "Then keep your head low." They moved toward the back porch. Pinto padded ahead, silent, nose to the ground. From inside came voices, men drinking, the low scrape of boots across wood, and Silas Crowley's rough laugh rolling through it all like bad whiskey. "He's expecting us," Isaiah said, jaw tightening. "Let him," Ruiz answered, and pushed the door open. The smell hit them first. Smoke, sweat, and the faint sting of gun oil. The parlor was lit by an oil lamp on the table, shadows pooling in the corners. Silas stood by the fireplace, back turned, turning a small pistol over in his hands. A pearl-handled derringer, delicate and deadly. "Well," he drawled, not turning around. "The law finally came knocking. You bring a warrant or a sermon, Ruiz?" "Both, if you're lucky," Ruiz said. "Step away from the fire." Silas turned, the pistol loose in his hand. His eyes slid past the sheriff and settled on Eva. "You brought the girl, too. Brave or foolish?" "My name is Whitcomb," Eva said. "You remember it." He smiled thinly. "Oh, I remember your daddy's name. Signed plenty of papers with it." "Forged," Isaiah said, stepping forward. "We've got proof, letters, deeds, and that key you thought was ash." Silas's gaze flicked toward him, amused. "You again. The black hero. I heard stories about you, Cole. How you made a life digging post holes and preaching freedom to people who don't want to hear it." Isaiah's answer came low, even. "You'll hear it tonight." "You talk big for a man who's outnumbered," Silas said, as Boone and Calder stepped from the shadows, rifles ready. Ruiz didn't flinch. She pulled a folded paper from her coat and tossed it onto the table. "Official order of the county," she said. "You're done, Crowley." Silas didn't even look. Paper burns easy. Then he raised the derringer. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The fire cracked, throwing sparks across the rug. Isaiah's hand drifted toward his holster, slow, careful. "Don't," Silas warned. "Would be ashamed to spill blood in such a fine room." Eva's voice cut the tension, soft but clear. "You already have." Ruiz's tone turned iron. "He didn't fall, Crowley. You pushed him." "Prove it," Silas snapped. "Isaiah, that's what we're here for." Pinto growled, low, deep. Boone glanced down. Isaiah moved. His revolver flashed toward the lamp. Glass shattered. Light died, and the room plunged into half-dark. A shot rang out, then another. "Get down!" Ruiz shouted. Eva dropped to her knees, crawling for the far wall. Gunpowder bit the air. Splinters tore from the jamb. Isaiah felt the sting of a graze along his shoulder and kept moving, low and sure. Boone fired blind. Pinto lunged, teeth catching cloth. The rifle barked wild, deafening in the small room. Through smoke and flame, Isaiah saw Silas at the window, dragging Eva by the arm, Derringer glinting at her ribs. "Let her go," Isaiah roared. "Stay back or she dies," Silas snarled. Ruiz advanced a step, gun steady. "Don't test me, Crowley." Silas's breath came ragged. "You think you can walk in here, take everything I built? You've got no idea what I paid for this land." Eva's voice shook, but her eyes stayed steady. "You didn't pay. You stole." Isaiah shifted his weight, just enough to pull Silas's gaze. Pinto barked once, sharp as a whip crack, and leapt. The dog hit Silas's knee. The Derringer fired wide, punching the mantel. Isaiah crashed into Silas, driving him down across the desk. Papers flew like startled birds. The pistol skittered. Ruiz kicked it away, her own revolver thundering once. Boone spun and fell. Calder dropped his gun and ran for the dark. When the smoke thinned, Silas lay face down, Isaiah's knee between his shoulders, wrists wrenched back. Ruiz snapped the iron shut with a hard click. "It's over." Eva stood in the center of the room, breathing fast, hands shaking. Isaiah rose slowly, chest heaving. He looked down at Silas, rage still burning in the man's eyes, but broken all the same. "You should have listened," Isaiah said softly. "Freedom doesn't come from what you take." The house fell quiet, save for Pinto's soft whimper, limping from the fight. Isaiah knelt, hand warm on the dog's neck. "Good boy." Outside, wind gathered, carrying the smoke away like ghosts lifted from the floor. Ruiz holstered her gun and turned to Eva. "You all right?" "I think so," Eva breathed. Ruiz nodded toward the door. "Get her out of here. Tomorrow we open that bank box. Tonight we rest." Isaiah led Eva into the night. The dark was cold and full of stars. She looked back once. Firelight flickered across Silas's face, and for the first time, he looked small. "It's done," Isaiah said softly. But the wind answered with a long, low breath across the hills, and they both knew the truth. It wasn't done, not yet. Morning came cold and bright. The dust over Silver Ridge hadn't settled from the night before. Word had already spread. Crowley arrested, 2 of his men gone to ground, and the sheriff seen riding at dawn toward the courthouse with a locked tin box under her arm. Isaiah and Eva followed close behind, Pinto limping beside the wagon. No one spoke much. Silence had weight here, like the pause between thunder and rain. In the sheriff's office, Ruiz laid the bank box on the desk. The key in Eva's hand trembled slightly as she fit it into the lock. For a breath, nothing happened. Then the latch gave, and the lid opened with a soft, metallic sigh. Inside were papers, deeds, contracts, letters, and a small folded note in handwriting they both recognized. Eva reached for it first, eyes moving across the page, voice faint as she read aloud. "If you find this, my daughter, the man you must trust is Isaiah Cole. He carries my word and my debt. Tell the sheriff to open the second ledger. The truth of this land lies not in oil, but in what men were willing to bury for it." Isaiah felt something shift deep inside, an old wound stirring. Ruiz pulled out the ledger, thick, bound in cracked leather, and began to flip through the pages, names, payments, signatures. Then she stopped, finger pressing to one line. "Here," she said. "A payment from Silas Crowley to—" She read the name twice, voice going quiet. "Deputy Marshal Caleb Brandt, for assistance in death of one Thomas Whitcomb." Ava's breath caught. "He paid someone to kill my father?" Ruiz nodded slowly. "And had the marshal cover it up as an accident." The room went still. Isaiah's fists clenched at his sides. Ava's voice rose, soft but fierce. "All this time, everyone thought my father was careless." Isaiah's reply came low, rough. "He wasn't. He died because he stood in the way of a man who didn't understand honor." Ruiz closed the ledger carefully, like laying down a body. "We'll take this to the judge by noon. Crowley will hang for this." Eva's tears came, but not fragile. They burned steady, alive. "I don't want him hanged. I just want the truth known." Isaiah looked at her, pride flickering behind tired eyes. "That's justice, Eva, not revenge." Ruiz nodded softly. "Your father would have said the same." She turned to Isaiah. "You did right, Cole. You could have walked away." "I tried that once," he said. "Didn't work." Ruiz studied him a moment, then leaned back. "Then I suppose the debt's paid." Isaiah traced the grain of the desk with his thumb. "Debts like this don't get paid. They just stop hurting as much." The deputy entered, hat in hand. "Ma'am, Crowley's asking to talk. Says he'll only speak to Cole." Ruiz frowned. "What for?" "Didn't say. Just keeps asking." Isaiah hesitated. Eva looked at him. "You don't have to go." "I know," he said, "but I should." He followed the deputy down the corridor. The iron bars glowed faintly in the sunlight. Silas sat on the cot, cuffs on, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller, now stripped of swagger and shadow. Isaiah stopped. "You wanted to talk." Silas gave a dry laugh. "I wanted to see the man who made me lose everything. Turns out he's just flesh and bone like the rest of us." You lost it yourself. Silas smirked. Your kind always gets the sermons right before you swing the rope. Isaiah stayed silent. Silas leaned forward, voice low. You think this town'll thank you? They'll take her land next year. Call it taxes or progress. You'll see. The world don't change, Cole. It just paints over its sins. Isaiah looked at him a long while. Maybe. But someone still has to hold the brush. Silas's face hardened. You talk like a preacher, but you still got blood on your hands. Don't forget, that girl's father died saving you. Isaiah's throat worked once. I never forgot. Silas leaned back, eyes gleaming. Then live with that. That's your gallows. Isaiah stepped closer. No, Crowley. My gallows was the day I stopped fighting. Today, I buried it. He turned and walked away, the echo of his boots the only sound in the hall. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering dust across the street. Eva waited by the door, her hand resting on Pinto's head. When she saw him, she smiled, soft, tremulous, carrying more strength than joy. Is it over? She asked. Almost. They stood there for a long while, watching the sun climb above the courthouse, burning off the last of the morning mist. The light caught her hair, turning it the color of wheat in harvest. For the first time in a long time, Isaiah felt something like peace press against the edges of his heart. Behind them, Ruiz's voice called out, We'll need your signatures before noon. Isaiah nodded, but didn't move. He looked toward the hills beyond town, where the wind carried the scent of apple trees still standing. Your father was right, he said softly. The land should feed people, not own them. Eva's hand found his. Then let's make sure it does. The Whitcomb house smelled of wood smoke and rain when they returned that evening. The wind had shifted, carrying the promise of spring across the valley. The fires of the past few days seemed to linger in the walls, but the quiet felt different now, less haunted, more alive. Isaiah pushed the door open and waited for Eva to step inside first. She paused at the threshold, her eyes sweeping over the familiar room. Everything was as it had been, except the air itself seemed lighter. The old bear rug lay before the hearth, its fur dulled by age, and the carved initials above the mantel, T.W., were half faded by time. She ran her fingers across them. He carved those when I was 10, she said softly. Said one day I'd carve my own beside his. Isaiah smiled faintly. Then you'd best keep his promise. She looked at him. Not alone. He cleared his throat, lowering the satchel he carried. Inside were the deeds, the bank ledgers, and the signed testimony that had ended Crowley's claim for good. Your land's yours again, he said. Eva nodded, her expression unreadable. Ours, she corrected gently. My father meant it to be yours too. The papers said so. He left a share to the man who saved him. Isaiah blinked. I never asked for. I know, she said. That's why he trusted you. Silence stretched between them, warm this time. Isaiah crouched near the fireplace, stacking kindling with careful hands. When the match caught, light filled the room, washing over the wooden walls like forgiveness. Garner, the lawyer, arrived an hour later with a briefcase full of documents and a face full of questions. "Miss Whitcomb, Mr. Cole, we need to finalize your signatures for transfer and partnership. Basic formalities." He laid the papers out on the table. Isaiah stood beside him, stiff as a fence post. Eva noticed the way his hand hesitated when Garner slid the pen across. "Here," Garner said, tapping the line. "Print your name first, then sign." Isaiah stared at the paper, the letters swimming like river weeds. The room tilted slightly. He cleared his throat. "Maybe you should read it out loud." Garner frowned, then nodded, reading each paragraph slow and clear. When he finished, Isaiah picked up the pen again, fingers tight. Eva's voice was soft, steady. "Isaiah, do you want me to read it with you?" He hesitated, then nodded once. She stepped closer, pointing to the first word, his own name. "Start here," she whispered. He swallowed hard, tracing each letter as she spoke. She said, smiling. "That's you." He exhaled a shaky laugh. "You make it sound easy." "It will be," she said. "Someday." Garner, seeing what passed between them, quietly packed his briefcase. "I'll file this in the morning," he said gently. "You've got till then to finish the rest." Then he left, closing the door behind him. For a while they stood there, the only sound the crackle of fire. Isaiah finally spoke. "Guess I should have told you. I never learned proper reading. Letters twist up on me like fence wire." Eva shook her head, not with pity, but with understanding. "You didn't have to tell me. I saw it the first time you looked at your father's letter." He looked away, ashamed. "Didn't want you thinking less of me." "I couldn't," she said. "You already taught me something most men never learn. That kindness is stronger than pride." He laughed quietly. "I don't know about that." She reached across the table, touching his hand. "Then let's trade lessons. You teach me how to mend fences, and I'll teach you how to read them." He looked at her, something loosening behind his ribs. "Deal." The firelight caught her face as she leaned closer. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked at peace. Not the kind that forgets, but the kind that forgives. "Say your name again," she whispered. He did. The letters came easier. Later, after she'd gone upstairs to rest, Isaiah stayed by the fire. His gaze drifted to the mantel, to the initials cut deep into the wood. He picked up his knife, leaning close, carving beneath the faded T-W, 2 new letters. I-C. The strokes were rough, uneven, but honest. When he finished, he sat back, smiling faintly. His hands still trembled, but not from fear. He'd signed something larger than paper tonight. A faint sound stirred behind him. Soft footsteps, a door creaking open. He turned to see a boy in the doorway, no more than 10, holding a wrinkled scrap of paper. "Jesse," Dell's foster child from the cabin down the hill, stood barefoot in the firelight. "Mr. Cole?" the boy asked, hesitant. You was learnin' letters?" Isaiah nodded. "I was." Jesse held out the paper shyly. "I tried too, but I can't make 'em sit straight." Isaiah took it gently. The lines wavered, but the effort was there. A child's scrawl trying to find its place. He smiled. "Looks better than mine did." Jesse looked up, uncertain. "Maybe. You could show me?" Isaiah glanced toward the stairs where Eva slept, then back at the boy. The fire cracked, sparks lifting toward the dark rafters. "Yeah," he said finally, voice low and warm. "Tomorrow we start with your name." The boy's grin flashed quick and bright. Then he ran back into the night. Isaiah turned back to the hearth. The carved letters glowed in the firelight. His father figures, and now his own. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like the beginning of a new language waiting to be spoken. But somewhere beyond that calm, something else stirred. The faint promise of change, of footsteps not yet taken, of stories still waiting to be told. By late spring, the valley carried the clean smell of turned earth and rain. On the Whitcomb porch, where the light fell soft and slantwise, Isaiah set a plank across 2 barrels for a table, lined up a tin of chalk, and waited for the small feet he now knew by sound. Jesse came first, hair sticking up, bare heels dusty. Martha and Tom trailed behind, whispering, while Pinto slid under the table as if class required a hound. Eva lifted the chalk and drew a neat A on the slate board. "This one opens doors," she said. "Say it from the chest. Let it out easy." "A," Jesse tried. Too hard at first, then softer. The vowel settled. Tom grinned like he'd roped it. Isaiah leaned against the post, hat tipped back, a look that wasn't quite a smile but lived next door to one. When Eva caught his eye, he shifted to her right side and nodded. Habit now, a promise kept without words. "Names," Eva said. "Write what belongs to you." Martha shaped her letters slow and careful. Tom scratched his fast and jagged. Jesse pressed too hard and snapped the chalk. He flushed, shoulders hitching. Isaiah knelt, palm open for the broken piece. "Still writes," he said. "Sometimes what's split takes the mark better." Jesse tried again. J-E-S-E. The line wobbled, then steadied. He looked up, waiting. Isaiah's grin arrived full and plain. Approval felt like a hand on the back, guiding without pushing. They sounded out small words after that. Home. Bread. Rate. Medium. Horse. Eva's voice moved like a river over stones, carrying them. Isaiah joined on home, the word landing deep. When Jesse finally read a full sentence, Martha clapped, Tom whooped, and Pinto thumped his tail as if language itself could be herded. They rested when the sun shifted, pouring lemonade from a chipped pitcher. The apple trees threw light across the porch, leaves quivering, bees slow with purpose. "Miss Ava," Martha asked. You ever been scared of words? Eva thought. Of silence more than words. Silence can lie if you let it. She glanced at Isaiah, not missing the way his hand brushed the pocket where he kept a folded page with his name written large, his own practice. Class turned to story. Eva read from a fresh page. A small tale about a skittish colt that wouldn't take a bridle until the boy stopped tugging and waited, hand open, heart quiet. The ending wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The colt chose trust. The porch held still long after the last line. Tom broke the hush. Did the colt stay? Isaiah answered, half to himself. If you treat something like it can run, it'll choose you when it stays. Cloud shadow crossed the yard. A whippoorwill started early. Eva gathered slates. Same time next Saturday, she said. Bring your mothers if they want to learn. Jessie lingered, tugged Isaiah's sleeve. Can you show me that S you do? The curly one? Isaiah drew it in the dust with a finger. Jessie copied, tongue poking out, and laughed when his came out near to perfect. He ran for the lane, yelling he'd teach the woohoo, cook before supper. The porch quieted. Heat bled off the boards. Eva set the chalk tin on the rail and watched the road where the children had gone. A road that felt less lonely now. Isaiah said softly, You make it simple. It is simple, she answered. Not easy. She turned to him. Thank you for staying on my right side. He shrugged. Best side to hear a promise. They stood with the sound of the trees around them, the valley breathing. Sparrowhawk nickered from the paddock. Pinto sighed like an old uncle and settled. Isaiah reached into his coat, thumb rubbing the edge of a small wooden box he'd carried all week. Tomorrow, he said, voice low, by the birches, near the creek bend. Eva's gaze lifted, steady as dawn. I'll come. He closed his fist over the box. The sky burned down to copper. Somewhere a door shut in the distance, the simple end of a day that knew what tomorrow held. The air tasted of water and apples. He felt the weight of a question turning light in his palm. On the road below the hill, a rider crossed the far field and kept going. No threat, only a line moving through the light. Isaiah's hand eased off the revolver he hadn't realized he'd touched. Tomorrow, then, he said. Tomorrow, she echoed, and the word felt like a room with the lamps already lit. The wind came softly up the slope, lifted the corner of her skirt, and carried the faintest scent of birch sap toward the creek. He had the strange sense the valley was listening with them, waiting for an answer that would be asked at last. Then the porch clock struck once, the sound small and clean, and the world held its breath between that note and the next. Morning light filtered through the birch trees, soft and gold. The creek ran slow, whispering over stones worn smooth by years of waiting. Isaiah stood by the water, hat in hand, the small wooden box warm in his palm. When Eva appeared through the mist, sunlight caught her hair like a living flame. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure you'd still be here, she replied, smiling. He opened the box. Inside a plain silver ring, thin, honest. "I've spent my life fixing what was broken," he said quietly. "You taught me some things ain't meant to be fixed, just held." Eva stepped closer, her voice barely above the creek's hum. "Then hold this moment." He slid the ring on her finger. Neither spoke for a while. The wind said enough. Pinto barked from the ridge. Sparrowhawk's silhouette grazed against the dawn. They stood with foreheads touching, the world turning slow around them. The past finally loosened its grip. "We'll stay," Eva whispered. "Teach, mend, grow." Isaiah nodded. "And when the wind changes, we'll still have this home." The birches trembled in reply, scattering gold leaves over the water like blessings. In the quiet of the frontier, Isaiah and Eva's story reminds us that freedom isn't always won with guns or power. It's found in trust, kindness, and the courage to begin again. Their love grew not from grand gestures, but from shared silences. Time 400 mems. From the simple act of listening and learning each other's hearts. Through their hands, the Whitcomb Ranch became more than a place. It became a symbol of healing, of second chances, and of choosing peace after years of struggle. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what memories or lessons it brought back for you. Stories of your own strength, or of someone who once taught you what love and home truly mean. And if you'd like to keep traveling with us through the wide, golden landscapes of the Old West, filled with warmth, humanity, and the kind of love that lasts a lifetime, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss our next story under the same big western sky. Thank you for riding with us, and may peace always find its way back to your heart.